I don't have many memories left from my past. The faces of my real parents were like faded masks in my mind. I only had some remains of my childhood, faceless names and total darkness. At the age of 9, something had happened into my family. The trauma was so deep that it made me forget most of my life. I only had the shred of a memory related to my best friend. He was the only one I had in my whole life. It was an image stuck in my mind, going together with laughter in the background and the melody of a music box. Among the back holes of my amnesia, I caught a glimpse of his honey-colored eyes and his dark mahogany hair. I remembered his friendly smile. But nothing else. All the rest disappeared in the dark. So did he. The memories went back to the orphanage from where I was born. Some awesome parents, Madalena and Stephen, who gave me back the warm feeling of having a family, adopted me, a feeling which I had forgotten. They raised me in their house until the age of 15. My amnesia led me to go on examinations and psychological checkups, which year after year were slowly starting to fail. It looked like I wouldn't be able to get my memory back. This fact left me distraught. On one hand, I wanted to know what happened, but on the other, an odd feeling of anxiety suggested I not to wish for it. Obviously, there were some unpleasant consequence to my trauma. It was just like some paranoia of being persecuted by something. The specialists told my parents it must have been linked to a particular memory, which was continuously stimulated. Neither the cause, nor what it was exactly was clear, but despite my efforts, I couldn't focus on it. I felt like I was being observed, not by people, but by the stuffed toys in my room. It was stupid, I know. At the beginning, they were simply toys, but time and time again, their big round eyes seemed to stare at me. Since I was little, I thought the stuffed toys in my room were alive, and sometimes I tried to prove it. I spied out of my room with the door left ajar. Then I turned back suddenly, and I never took my eyes off them. Not until I felt a bit of a burning sensation from not blinking my eyes. That memory was one of the few memories from my childhood that still made me smile. But things have changed. Time after time, the stuffed toys were the ones staring at me. It almost looked like they wanted to test me, and I couldn't bear it anymore. The thought stuck in my mind. At times, it seemed to me that they moved, turning their little faces towards me. At other times, they made the noises in my room. This couldn't be true, obviously. Why did this thought persecute me? Why did I hate those stuffed toys? In spite of everything, why didn't I get rid of them? I could have presented them to other children, or thrown them in the rubbish. One day I tried. Really, I did. But when I took one of them in my arms, a strong day I tried. Really, I did. But when I took one of them in my arms, a strong sense of anxiety and terror stopped me. I always ended up putting them back to their places, on the furniture, on my bed, on the shelves. Then I had to take tranquilizers. There was only one toy I took along with me during the night. Despite my age, I couldn't separate from him, and I felt a familiar affection from him that started long before my amnesia. I found him in my wardrobe at the orphanage, and from there on out we became inseparable. It was a sweet bunny with ears as long as him. On one side it was red, and on the other its side resided caramel color. He wore a black waistcoat, with 2 long sleeves that draped down to the point of his feet, and dashed an elegant collar that donned pointed tips at every edge of the fabric. His little left beaded eye was covered with a stylish frilly eye patch, and at the center donned a black button. It was funny, but it looked like the only stuffed toy that was harmless. He slept by my side ever since I was little, just like that night, after I sneak under the sheets, falling asleep almost instantly among the creaking old walls. I was standing still in the darkness, unable to move, and I couldn't understand how I ended up there, surrounded only by the distilled silence. Something slimy grabbed my wrist, and it held me so tightly that an instant pain shot right through me. A set of white nails slowly penetrated my flesh. I watched them cutting through my skin, making me bleed. I screamed and cried, but a laugh bellowed out, covering my desperate pleas. "She belongs to me," a voice whispered to me. Within that dark abyss, two green sparkling eyes appeared before me. They were few inches away from my face. "You are only a hindrance to me." He laughed, amused by my pain, while he pierced needles under my nails and into my flesh. He ruined my body with rusty tools. On the contrary, he said he was going to fix me all up. I noticed an open door, the only thing I could distinguish from the darkness. My eyes blurred by the pain. I saw a glimpse of people standing still, gazing down at me. The image of that door got closer, in order to show me their vacant expression. Despite the grimaces plastered on their faces, I saw that they were not real people. They were dolls, and in some way, I felt a strong sense of nausea overcome me by just for staring at them. There was something about them that made me weak to the stomach, and maybe it was their extraordinary and macabre resemblance to real people. "She belongs to me." With that, I woke up, my eyes wide open, and the beating of my heart was so loud that I could feel them pounding inside my throat. I couldn't breathe, so I stood up, then sat back down. I rubbed my eyes, and I realized that I was sweating. The bunny fell, landing upside down. I leaned down for him and put him back on the bed. My breathing returned to its normal breathing pace, but the image of those needles, dirty of blood, and those terrifying dolls remained embedded in my mind. I never had such a nightmare like that before. The feelings were so terribly real. I still felt those claws making a hole in my flesh, but I was relieved that I woke up. The door squeaked. It was my mother coming in the room. As soon as she saw my exhausted face, her smile on her face faded away. "Honey, are you okay?" "Yes. I only had a nightmare. Now everything is all right." "Well, okay. Daisy came to visit you. I told her to wait for you in the living room." With that, I got out from bed. I was dressed poorly, and I didn't want my best friend to see me in that way. While my mother closed the door, I ran over to my wardrobe and took out an ordinary dress. In the space of a few minutes, I came out of my room neat and ready. In my haste, I was out of breath. "Finally!" exclaimed Daisy, smiling. I met Daisy at middle school, and ever since then we were inseparable. She was a kind and generous person. She was always welcome in our family. My parents appreciated her good manners, but what I loved about her especially was that she never asked me anything about my past. I was able to tell her about my amnesia in complete confidence. The day was nice and sunny, so we laid down in the garden, under an old tupelo tree. We talked while sheltering from the sun in the shade of the tree. I brought some colored pencils and blank sheets of paper, and we both started drawing. Daisy felt tired immediately. She started picking daisies, put them in her blonde braid while she gossiped about Louisa, a girl who lived for being the center of people's attention. While my friend was talking, I listened to her and kept on drawing without taking my eyes off the sheet of paper. "Who's that?" she asked me suddenly, noticing the drawing. It was as if I fell asleep in that exact moment. I battered my eyelids in front of the sheet of paper, and I felt rather confused about seeing a drawing repeated several times on the same character. "I don't know." I did not have the slightest idea of who he was. The clearest drawing showed a man wearing a black jacket with an extravagant and voluminous fur on his shoulders. He had a beautiful, happy smile and two yellow eyes that was covered a bit by his fringe. He wore dark clothing, and in his hands, he was holding a little blue case resembling a music box. Maybe I saw him in an illustration book. "Oh, okay. Let's have an ice cream," said Daisy, changing the subject of our conversation, seemingly not very interested. "Ants are coming under my skirt." On that same night, I had another nightmare, and this was worse than the previous one I had before. I dreamt about that dark figure again, who brutally tortured me and kept saying the same phrase all over again. "She's mine." I woke up at 2 a.m. breathing rapidly. I curled up, feeling the wall behind my back. I put my hands over my face and I breathed in deeply. It was a dream. Just a dream, I whispered. Then I looked over at the bunny next to me, which was looking back at me with his black eye and with an irritated glance. I threw it on the floor. Since the moment I started sleeping with that thing, my dreams turned into meaningless nightmares. I turned around to rest my legs, and in that moment, I touched something with my foot. I elevated my gaze and I noticed a doll sitting on my bed. At first I was frozen in place. All I could do was stare at her. I didn't understand how she appeared there. My mind started thinking back to my parents, who giving me a present. Perhaps I didn't have a real thing for dolls, and to tell the truth, her presence in my room bothered me. It was a peculiar doll made of wax with unusual characteristics. She had a headdress of flowers flowing through her hair and only few locks caressed her cheeks. She wore an embroidered white lace dress with a black ribbon tied to her waist. Her arms were unordinary long. She had long tapering fingers that they were not even normal. What caught the most my attention was a rose put at the center of her mouth as if it was supposed to silence her. I looked at her closer and I scanned her under the moonlight. I touched her face and realized there was something wrong. I kneeled down and tried to get an even closer look at her. I then heard something. A sort of subdued sound. Like a wheeze. It was coming from the same doll. Screaming. I let her falling down on the floor and stood up in horror, trembling violently, pushing myself back to the wall, screaming for my parents. Suddenly everything turned surreal. The wall next to the door enlarged. Like there was a bubble between the paint and the cement. Slowly some cracks appeared as they increased in number. The paint fell into pieces, landing on the floor as it revealed a blue door. I hadn't the slightest idea of what was happening. These things exist only in books, or in our imagination, but in my astonishment, I felt something was going to come out of that door. From the door, I see the same black hands that I witnessed in my nightmares. "Aren't you happy about Daisy coming to visit you, are you?" said the monster, standing on the threshold of the door. I didn't like her either, you know. She screamed a lot. Daisy. What she had to do with it? I looked around confused, looking for the presence of my friend that obviously was not there anymore. At the end, my eyes watched over the doll. That blonde hair and face made of wax looked strangely familiar. I held my breath. A nightmare. It must have been another nightmare. I rushed over to the doll and I turned her face in my trembling hands. I put my ear over her chest and heard another sound along with that horrible wheeze, the pounding of a heart. Daisy! Daisy! I cried desperately. It had to be a nightmare. Something like this could not have been happening. I realized my parents were next to my room according to the sounds I heard. They must have heard me screaming. But the monster blocked the entrance. He pulled the door shut, blocking it in its same setting, deforming the wood. My parents started punching on the other side, and I didn't know what to do. It did not look like a dream. It was perfectly clear. It was more real than those nightmares of darkness and torture. My heart was beating so fast that I started to feel pain from it. I felt the sweat on my forehead and the doll trembling in my hands, which I couldn't keep still. The monster stood at the entrance, not moving from there. In the half-light, I could see his evil smirk, as if he was waiting for my reaction. I unbuttoned Daisy's dress, who looked imprisoned under the tons of wax, and I started to dig, trying to set her free. I dug, and I dug and I dug, while her moans became more intense. Until I felt something wet under my nails. I looked at my hands, covered with blood. Her skin must have been mixed with the wax, and the digging I did was not helping her at all. The thing that supposedly to be Daisy was suffering. Her wheezes were blood-curdling, but her expression was still that of an impassive doll. I trembled with horror. I had to repress a retch, and suddenly I felt my arm being grabbed. "My splendid Maggie, you've ruined your doll!" exclaimed the monster. His whitish eyes sparkled with a pale green light. "You even threw Mr. Bunny on the floor. But I forgive you. You must return to the place where you belong. By my side. Who the hell are you?"